and well, yeah, if you want a 1,000-foot view, you have to go all the way back to the beginning of creation itself and whatever we can speculate about it, okay? Because, I mean, it doesn't matter what religion you look at. I mean, okay, let's take Christianity, for example. So according to the Bible, in the beginning, there was darkness, there was the void. And then God said, let there be light. And then, everything was generated out of that. So a lot of these philosophical systems or religions, they start off with a void of nothingness, of infinite potentiality, but zero manifested actuality, okay? And something, God, the infinite creator, source, whatever you want to call it, projected into that the entire multiverse of all possibilities. So if we take that as, okay, as a given, okay, if we assume that that was the case, then we also have to acknowledge that not only was there God, but there was also projections of God into individuated sentient beings endowed with free will. And that is what we are. Life is beings with some degree of free will, and free will increases to the degree that you are conscious and aware and informed. So obviously, like a little bacteria or something is going to have way less consciousness and way less free will than a human would. And in turn, we would have less consciousness and free will than some ultra-terrestrial being that is eons and eons more evolved than we are. Okay. But the point is, once free will exists, once you have the ability to divide the infinite field of consciousness into just self and other, then arises the choice about whether you want to help and work in harmony with others, or whether you want to treat the other as an enemy or as a resource to exploit. And that starts building the very core, the very initial spark of evil. Because evil results from free will choosing to turn against the source, against creator, against the interests of others, and to work only for self, against others. So you can't really have free will without evil, and you can't have evil without free will. All right? So I think that's where the original schism was. During the act of creation, the very conditions that allowed for individuated beings with free will to exist gave rise to the potential for evil. And some beings decided to choose that because perhaps they had encounters with the physical world, with the rules and laws and limitations here, with competition and therefore predation and force and violence. And they started internalizing those rules into their spiritual makeup, and they started identifying with matter and its limitations. And so therefore they absorbed essentially the darkness into themselves, and they became agents of that darkness, agents of unknowing, of the void, of non-being. And so I think that's what evil ultimately is. It's a fragment of God, or a fragment of creation that has chosen of its own free will to adopt the ways and the nature of darkness, of the void, of non-being, and to act in its interests by basically undoing or feeding upon or exploiting greater creation. Right? So that was the original schism. And then since that time, you could have had many other different schisms or falls. For example, let's say that 80,000 years ago, there was a very advanced humanoid civilization, let's say on some other planet in the solar system or some other solar, star system entirely. And they were incredibly good and advanced, kind of like in the Superman myth, where Superman's civilization that he came from, they were very advanced people with superpowers, with very advanced technologies, but they had a schism within them. There was almost like a Lucifer rebellion, where part of them went against the main group. Maybe they developed too much of an ego or too much hubris or pride or contempt or whatever. And they split away, and there was a war. And then they were kicked out of that realm, and they came here to Earth. Okay. So in that case, you've got basically what we're talking about is we're talking about fallen angels, which the book of Enoch talks about quite a bit. Mm-hmm. The idea of there having been a group of angels, and some of them rebelled, and some of them decided to come into physicality, into Earth, in order to breed with human women here and insert themselves into the karmic time stream that we have going on Earth, and they became part of it. And because of their influence, they ended up corrupting humanity at large because they gave humans technology and magic and all this other stuff way before their time. So it's almost like Prometheus giving fire to humans and being punished for it. These fallen angels were punished for giving humans technology that humans weren't ready for yet. And because of that technology, they were developed, violence and increasing means of war and corruption and debauchery and so on. And so therefore the higher beings who kicked them out, they decided to go ahead and cleanse the earth of all this wickedness. And that's what Noah's flood supposedly was all about, according to that particular viewpoint. Anyway, so the reason why I bring that up is because that's yet another fall where you have these higher beings wanting to come here to mess with the existing ecosystem, which includes humans, and screw it up due to their influence. So that's like the Lucifer rebellion aspect of it. And then you can go even further where, for example, you've got the idea that reptilians or some other negative alien group, they came along and they genetically modified the our ancestors. So our primate ancestors, the hominids, they were genetically modified to build a new model, which I guess would be Homo sapiens or maybe one of our, just prior precursors, to be useful to them, right? Which ties into the whole Zechariah Sitchin Anunnaki stuff where they modified humans to be a slave race, okay, something like that. And then the human soul matrix, which apparently existed in some other realm, they were tempted or lured into entering those bodies and to therefore also enter into the karmic time stream of Earth and become part of the fate and the destiny of Earth. And so that's like a fall from a higher realm of human, where humans used to exist, down into this material plane, into these genetically modified bodies which are lacking psychic abilities and are dumbed down in genetics or in IQ, and we have got a shorter lifespan than we should have, right? So we've been funneled down into these bodies that have been modified by hostile powers, offering some incentive for us coming here. Like maybe we thought that this would be a greater challenge. Maybe we like the idea of carnality, the whole like sexual reproduction aspect of it or something, the family and the challenge and the drama that comes with it. Maybe that looked like, hey, that's a cool game. Let's go play that. So we got lured into these things, and here we are, sort of semi-trapped in this whirlpool of karma and illusion and making mistakes and thinking you have to make up for those mistakes. And, you kind of caught up in this whirlpool. So that's yet another fall, right? So we've got the initial schism at the very beginning of creation. You've got higher civilizations where they rebelled against one another and maybe someone got kicked out and they came down here. And then you've got like the human soul matrix being lured into here. And then to take it one step further, which is what I focus on in my Gnosis book, in there I talk about how advanced alien technologies have been misused throughout history for the gain of a particular group, but it ended up corrupting the timeline. It deviated the destiny of Earth away from where it should have been. And one example of that is the Ark of the Covenant. So what I talk about in my Gnosis book is how the Ark of the Covenant, that was just a box, okay? But inside the box was some sort of alien crystal, artificially intelligent occult technology that was contained therein. And this intelligence allowed the Israelites to essentially exist, to pillage their way north and to establish the kingdom of Israel, and to therefore lead to the entire timeline involving Jews and Israelites and eventually the Nazis and World War II, Holocaust, and blah, 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 which led to the military-industrial complex and deals with aliens. And here we are nowadays in 2024, and our world owes a lot of the way things are back in history to the Ark of the Covenant, because that is an intrusion from outside the Earth plane, outside the Earth sphere. It allowed a particular group within that sphere to do things that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to. Right. So I get into that in my book, amongst many other things like alchemy and the Holy Grail, which is all part of the same technology. And I explain how alien technology has been misused to create the world that we exist in nowadays. And so there's a battle going on nowadays, which ties back into what I said earlier about the dark state and different alien agendas. There's a battle waging between those higher levels, involving either continuing to deviate the fate of Earth or to kind of steer it back into the way it originally was supposed to be. So there's forces of correction and balance and forces of exploitation and predation who want Earth to become even more hellish than it already is. But that's all happening under the surface. As I mentioned earlier, what we see in the news is only the surface puppet show of all that.